I went up to my mountain cabin for some peace and found my sister's in-laws lounging in my reading chair. When I asked who invited them, she replied, "You weren't using it." That day I changed everything. She sat in my chair like she owned it. Legs crossed, cup of coffee steaming, eyes half on the view and half on me, as if daring me to say something. What would you do if someone sat in the one place that meant peace to you? Watch till the end. This story will leave you breathless. It was 7:42 a.m. on a Sunday in late October. The sun had just slipped between the pines, casting gold over the deck, but inside my cabin the air felt tight. You can feel disrespect before you hear it. It hangs heavier than smoke. My sister's voice floated from the kitchen, cheerful and sharp at the same time. "You're early," she said as if I were the guest. Her in-laws didn't even glance my way. One of them, the daughter-in-law with the diamond bracelet too bright for the mountains, tilted my chair back and laughed at something on her phone. I remember gripping the doorknob for balance. I hadn't been here in 2 weeks. I'd gone into town to get repairs done on the truck, thinking I'd come back to quiet, maybe a fire and a book waiting for me. Instead, I found strangers treating my space like a roadside inn. "Morning," I said, my voice steady, maybe too steady. Years of marriage, divorce, and raising 2 kids had taught me how to make calm sound like a warning. The daughter-in-law looked up, startled for half a second before recovering. "Oh, we didn't expect you so soon," she said, and then went right back to sipping from my favorite mug, the chipped blue one I'd had since my 40s. I walked toward the chair. My chair. The old leather creaked a little under her, the same sound it used to make when I'd sit there with my morning paper, back when silence still meant peace, not absence. "Where's Mom?" I asked my sister, though what I really meant was, why are they here? "She's in town," she said, avoiding my eyes. "I told them they could stay for a few days. You weren't using the place." "Weren't using." The words hit harder than I let her see. I smiled. The kind of smile women my age learn from surviving things we never got credit for surviving. "That's true," I said. I wasn't. But in my head I wasn't smiling. In my head I was already counting how many times she'd crossed that invisible line between sister and intruder. Once when she borrowed my coat and gave it away. Twice when she forgot to return the spare key. 3 times now with her in-laws sitting where I read my piece into existence. I walked to the window, opened it an inch. Cold mountain air poured in. The daughter-in-law shivered but didn't move. "Nice view," she said. "It's why I bought the place," I replied. There was silence after that, the uncomfortable kind that hums right before something breaks. My sister busied herself with the kettle, pretending to be helpful, pretending this was all normal. I noticed small things. The faint lipstick stain on my mug. The crumbs on the rug. The faint scent of cheap perfume and burnt toast where there should have been pine and cedar. They weren't big offenses but small acts of ownership. That's how it always starts. A borrowed chair, a borrowed weekend, a borrowed life. "Hope you don't mind," my sister said finally. They needed a break from the city. I looked around. My books stacked wrong, my blanket draped upside down, my house suddenly breathing in a rhythm that wasn't mine. "Oh, I don't mind," I said. "Everyone needs a break." Her shoulders loosened, mistaking calm for forgiveness. That's the thing about people like her. They mistake silence for surrender. Later, when they went for a walk, I sat on the edge of the couch and just looked at everything. My chair, slightly sunken now. The framed photograph of our parents, moved an inch to the left. The glass door left open, letting cold air in. I reached under the chair cushion and smiled when I felt it. The little brass key I'd hidden years ago, taped to the wood beneath the seat. My father taught me that trick when I first bought the cabin. "Always keep a spare but never tell anyone where," he'd said. That key was more than metal now. It was a reminder that no one truly owned this place but me. That was my hidden advantage. She didn't know I'd been planning to sell the cabin next spring. She didn't know I'd already drawn up papers. And she definitely didn't know that every bill, every deed, every record was in my name alone. But I said nothing. I just ran my fingers along the armrest, tracing the same pattern I had when my husband left 20 years ago, when my children moved away, when I'd first learned that peace has to be protected like property. That night I stayed in town at the inn. Let them have the cabin one more night. Sometimes it's better to watch people in their comfort before you take it away. The next morning I returned early. Mist hung low over the valley and the cabin looked smaller in the fog. I could hear laughter before I opened the door. The daughter-in-law was standing by the fireplace in my robe, while my sister's husband was poking at logs he didn't know how to stack. "Morning again," I said. This time the laughter stopped. "Oh, we were just," my sister began. "Using what I wasn't using?" I asked. My tone was mild, but the kind of mild that burns slow. She blinked. "Don't be like that." "Like what?" I said. "Present." She frowned but said nothing. Her in-laws exchanged looks, clearly uncomfortable now. The daughter-in-law folded the robe neatly, suddenly remembering it wasn't hers. I poured myself a cup of coffee. The mug was still warm from her hands. "You've made yourselves at home," I said quietly. "Only for a few days," she insisted. I said. "I'm sure." Outside a crow called. The sound echoed through the trees like a warning. I sat down in the chair she'd used, my chair. The leather was still warm. I leaned back, closed my eyes and breathed in. Coffee, pine, and a faint trace of perfume. The scent of boundaries broken. When I opened my eyes, she was still standing there. "I thought you liked company," she said, forcing a smile. "I do," I said. "When they're invited." Something flickered in her expression. Guilt, maybe. Or fear of what I'd say next. I didn't plan to say much. Words lose power when you've already decided what to do. I spent the rest of the day pretending things were fine. I made soup. I laughed at her jokes. I let them borrow my car to see the town. Every act of kindness, measured and deliberate. People always reveal themselves when they think they've won. By the time they returned, the snow had started to fall, thin flakes melting against the windows. My sister looked surprised to see me still there. "You're staying tonight?" she asked. "I think I will," I said, stirring my tea. "There's something peaceful about being home." She hesitated, sensing something she couldn't name. That unease, that's where revenge begins. Not in anger but in calm so cold it looks kind. They went to bed early. I stayed up, writing names on small envelopes, each one containing something important. A list of repair costs. A reminder of unpaid shares. A quiet note to my lawyer in town. I didn't plan to make a scene. I planned to end one. At midnight I checked the locks, all still the same for now. The key under the chair waited like a secret I could still use. The storm outside grew louder. Snow brushed against the window pane in waves, like nature itself trying to warn them. This peace isn't free. I sat in my chair again. My chair. I let my fingers rest on the worn armrest, feeling every year I'd spent protecting this place. Every dollar I'd saved to buy it, every lonely winter I'd spent keeping it warm. It wasn't just furniture. It was proof that I could build something on my own and keep it standing. And there she was upstairs, sleeping under my roof, thinking she'd claim something she never earned. The clock struck 1. I blew out the candle and smiled into the dark. Let them sleep. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something they wouldn't see coming. Outside the snow fell heavier. The world was silent except for the slow ticking of the clock and the whisper of the wind. I leaned back, pulled the blanket over my knees and whispered to the empty room, "You weren't using it." It felt good, throwing her words back into the quiet, letting them hang there. Not yet revenge. Not yet justice. But the beginning of both. Her words still lingered long after the sound of her car faded down the mountain road. I stayed seated in that same chair she had claimed, the leather still warm from her intrusion, and listened to the quiet fill the cabin again. It wasn't peace. Not yet. It was the heavy silence that comes after something has cracked. Not enough to break, but enough that you'll never trust it again. I didn't call her. I didn't demand apologies. I just went about my week as if nothing had happened. That's the advantage of being older. You learn that distance can do the talking for you. When she called 3 days later, her tone was light, almost rehearsed. "Just checking in," she said. "How's the cabin holding up?" I smiled at the phone, though she couldn't see it. "Holding up fine," I replied. "Quiet as always." We talked about small things. The weather, Mom's latest complaints, the rising cost of groceries. Neither of us mentioned the chair. Or the in-laws. Or how she'd taken ownership of my space without asking. We pretended the wound had already healed, though we both knew it hadn't even scabbed over. Weeks passed like that, polite texts, short calls, carefully chosen words. But underneath the surface something had shifted. She began dropping by the cabin more often. Always with a reason that sounded harmless. I was in the area. I thought I'd check on you. I brought soup. The first time I let her in. The second time I hesitated. By the third, I understood she wasn't visiting, she was checking her territory. One afternoon, I came back from town to find her car parked crookedly near the porch. Through the window, I saw her moving things around in my kitchen. Casual, comfortable, as if she lived there. I stood outside for a moment, the groceries cold in my hands, watching her rearrange my spice rack. She didn't even flinch when I opened the door. "Oh, you're back early," she said, smiling that too bright smile. "I was just tidying up. You always keep the sugar too far from the stove." I set the bags down carefully. "I like it that way," I said. Her hand froze on the counter for just a second. Then she laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. "You've always been so particular." When she left, I moved every jar back exactly where it belonged. It wasn't about sugar or spices. It was about the small ways people like her tested limits. Gentle taps against a locked door to see if it might open. The next week, she came with her husband. I found him flipping through my books in the living room, holding one upside down like a prop. "Nice collection," he said. "You must read a lot out here." "I do," I replied. Mostly in silence. He laughed, not understanding. My sister walked in, carrying 2 cups of tea as if she were the hostess. "Don't mind him," she said. "He's just curious." Curious. That's what she called it when her husband touched things that didn't belong to him, when her children used my cabin as their playground, when she let herself in without knocking. Always curious. Always justified. That night after they left, I noticed one of my old journals sitting slightly open on the shelf. My heart dropped. I reached for it and found a page torn clean out, not ripped by accident but carefully removed. I didn't need to look to know which one it was. It had been dated the summer I divorced my husband, filled with words I'd written through tears and survival. I sat there for a long time holding that journal, feeling something colder than anger. Violation. That's what it was. She hadn't just entered my home, she'd entered my head. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I knew her kind of guilt. If you confronted it, she'd twist it into concern. "I was just worried about you," she'd say. "You've been so distant lately." Instead, I went quiet again. I stopped answering her calls for a week, then 2. When she finally caught me on the line, her voice was soft, too soft. "You've been hard to reach," she said. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said, folding laundry that didn't need folding. "Just busy." She sighed into the phone. "You know, you're lucky to have that cabin. I don't think you appreciate it the way you should." "I appreciate it exactly the way I should," I replied. She laughed awkwardly. "You sound defensive." "I sound awake," I said. Then I hung up. That night I didn't sleep. I walked through the cabin, touching every lock, every window latch. The walls creaked in the cold, and each sound made me wonder if it was just the wind, or memory trying to get in. I poured myself tea at midnight and stood by the window, looking at the snow gathering under the porch light. Everything looked peaceful, but I knew peace could be deceptive. In the morning I gathered every item she'd ever left here. A scarf, a pair of slippers, a casserole dish, a framed photo she'd once forgotten. I boxed them carefully, labeled the top "Sister, Return." When I taped it shut, the sound of it felt final, like a small door closing. A few days later, she appeared again without warning. Her car crunched over the gravel, her smile bright enough to hide intent. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, pretending surprise at the box by the door. "What's all this?" "Your things," I said. "I figured you might want them back." Her face flickered. Surprise, confusion, and then that polite mask sliding back into place. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," I said simply. "But I wanted to." She stepped past me into the living room without being invited. "It looks so different," she said, running her fingers over the mantel. "Cleaner, somehow." "I like it that way," I replied. For a moment we stood there, both pretending to admire the view. The winter trees stood bare, stripped of their leaves. The cold sunlight spilled through the glass, pale and sharp. Then she said it, the line that sealed everything. "I've always loved this house," she whispered. "It feels like ours." The word froze in the air between us. "Ours." I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. "It isn't," I said. My voice didn't tremble. It didn't rise. It just carried the kind of finality that doesn't need echoing. She tried to laugh it off, saying I was too sensitive, that she didn't mean anything by it. But the tone of her voice told me she did. That single word had slipped out from somewhere honest. She believed it, believed my peace, my space, my solitude could somehow belong to her. When she left, I didn't watch her go. I just sat down in my chair and breathed, letting the silence settle around me like armor. That evening the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but old habits die hard. Her voice came through the line, brittle but careful. "You've changed," she said. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe I just started noticing things I used to excuse." She didn't speak for a moment. Then, "You make it sound like I've done something wrong." I looked at the boxes stacked by the door, at the small scratches on the floor where her chair had been moved, at the faint smell of her perfume that still lingered. "I don't need to make it sound like anything," I said. "You know what you've done." Her breath hitched. "I was just trying to help." "You've done enough helping," I said and hung up. After that, the calls stopped. Instead, she sent short, polite messages, the kind people send when they want to sound close but don't dare step near again. "Happy holidays. Hope you're warm up there. Miss you." I answered every one of them with a single sentence. "All good here. Take care." But silence has a way of drawing people back. In late January, my neighbor called. "Your sister's car was outside again today," he said. "Didn't see her knock, but she was there a while." I thanked him, said nothing more. When I drove up that evening, everything looked untouched. Except one thing. The study window was open an inch. I hadn't opened it. Inside my desk was the same, almost. My notebook, the one I'd started after all this began, was turned a quarter inch to the left. The pen that usually sat across it was gone. My throat tightened and I checked the drawers. The pen was there, tucked neatly back as if whoever touched it wanted me to notice but not accuse. That's the thing about certain kinds of disrespect. They don't want your things, they want your reaction. I gave them neither. Instead, the next morning I drove into town and called a locksmith. He replaced every lock, every latch, and showed me how to set up a small camera near the porch. "You've had trouble before?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "But I'm learning." That night, I sat in my chair with a blanket and a cup of tea, watching the snow fall in quiet sheets against the glass. The new locks clicked softly in the background. My phone buzzed with a message from her. "You didn't answer my last call. Everything okay?" I looked at it for a long time before replying. "Everything's fine. Just keeping things in order." Then I turned off the phone and smiled to myself. A small, tired smile. Because by then I understood something I hadn't before. Distance isn't cruel. It's clean. Politeness can build walls just as strong as anger ever could. And the farther she stayed on her side of them, the safer I finally felt. That thought stayed with me long after I put down my phone. The snow outside had stopped, leaving the world soft and white, like everything ugly had been buried for the night. Inside, the cabin was warm, almost too warm. I sat in my chair, tea gone cold, listening to the tick of the old wall clock. The quiet should have comforted me. It used to. But lately it carried edges, small, sharp ones I could feel under my skin. I caught myself glancing at the window more often than I should have, watching the reflection of the room behind me instead of the darkness outside. That's how fear grows when you've lived long enough. Not in screams or shocks, but in little checks and pauses. The habit of looking over your shoulder, not because you expect trouble, but because you know what people are capable of when they think you won't notice. The next morning I found footprints again, faint, half-melted, circling the porch. Maybe animal, maybe not. It was hard to tell. I stared at them for a while, then went back inside and locked the door twice. By afternoon I'd made up my mind. I called the locksmith. He arrived before dusk, a quiet man in a gray coat, polite and careful with his tools. The kind of man who didn't ask questions but noticed everything. He inspected the front door, then the back, running his thumb along the hinges. "Old fittings," he said. "Strong but outdated." I watched him work, the smell of cold metal filling the hallway. Each click of his screwdriver sounded like punctuation, the ending of something long overdue. "How many keys will you need?" he asked. "Just one," I said. "Only one." He nodded without comment. When he finished, he handed me the single key. It was small, silver, and cold against my palm. A new beginning never looks dramatic. Sometimes it's just a key heavier than it should be. After he left, I locked the door and stood there a long time, listening to the steady hum of the heater and the wind brushing the window panes. It was strange. I felt both relieved and lonelier than I had in years. Independence can do that to you. It's freeing and isolating at the same time. That night I decided to test every lock myself. Front door, back door, windows, cellar hatch. Each one clicked firm, definite, final. When I reached the study window I paused. The same one I'd found open before. I pressed my palm to the glass. It was cold, almost icy, but solid now. And yet, a thought whispered at the edge of my mind. What if the danger wasn't outside anymore? I shook it off, told myself it was nonsense. Still, I double-checked every latch. Then I made tea, turned on the radio, and let the familiar hum of old country songs fill the cabin. At around 10 the phone rang. The sound startled me, sharp, cutting through the quiet like a crack of lightning. I hesitated before answering. It was her. "I just wanted to make sure you're all right," she said. Her voice sounded softer than I remembered, cautious, almost guilty. "I'm fine," I replied. "Just keeping things in order." "You sound distant," she said. "I'm trying to be." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "You're overreacting, you know. I never meant to upset you." "You didn't upset me," I said. "You invaded me." Another silence. I could almost hear her shifting on the other end of the line, trying to decide whether to fight or retreat. "You've changed," she finally said. "Good," I answered. It was about time. I hung up before she could respond. I set the phone down and sat in the dark for a while, the new key warm in my pocket. It wasn't anger I felt, not anymore. It was something quieter, heavier. A tired kind of resolve. When you're younger, revenge feels like a fire. At my age, it feels more like a lock clicking shut. Deliberate, final, almost peaceful. The storm rolled in around midnight. The wind pressed against the cabin walls, and the branches outside scraped against the windows like restless fingers. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat near the fireplace, watching the flames twist and settle. That's when I heard it, a faint, dull sound from the porch. Not a knock. More like the creak of wood under weight. I froze, listening. The fire crackled. The wind hissed. And then, again, a slow step, then another. I stood quietly, heart thudding. The new lock gleamed faintly in the light. I took a deep breath and moved toward the window, careful not to let the floorboards creak. Outside I could see only the snow, pale, drifting, unbroken. Maybe it was a branch, maybe an animal. Or maybe I was finally hearing my own nerves out loud. Still, I didn't open the door. I simply waited, hand on the key, until the noise faded into the storm. It took a long time to calm down. I sat in my chair, staring at the fire, reminding myself that fear was exactly what she wanted. Control, even in absence. She'd always been good at that, twisting guilt into worry, worry into obedience. Around 2 in the morning, the electricity flickered. The cabin dimmed, then steadied again. The shadows shifted across the walls. For a moment I thought I saw movement near the window. Just a reflection probably, but enough to make my breath hitch. That's when I realized I hadn't drawn the curtains. I stood, crossed the room and pulled them shut slowly. As I did, something caught my eye, a faint smudge on the glass low near the frame. I leaned closer. A fingerprint. Not mine. It was recent. Too recent. My throat tightened. The air in the cabin felt thinner suddenly, like I couldn't get enough of it. I locked the window again, then backed away, forcing myself to breathe. Maybe it was from the locksmith, I told myself. Maybe. But my gut said otherwise. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat up reading, the key on the table beside me, the fire burning low. When dawn finally came, it painted the snow pink and gold, as if the world had decided to forget the night entirely. I made breakfast I didn't eat. Toast, eggs, coffee gone cold. My hands trembled just enough to spill a little sugar. I cleaned it up slowly, deliberately, the way you do when you need to feel in control of something, anything. At noon I drove into town. I stopped at the post office, mailed a letter to my lawyer. Just routine paperwork, but I added a note at the bottom. Property security updated. No visitors allowed without notice. The woman at the counter smiled politely as she weighed the envelope. "Snow's heavy up there, huh?" "Getting heavier," I said. When I returned home, the cabin felt different. Not safer, not yet, but claimed again. I took a walk around the property, crunching through the snow, checking every fence post and window. The footprints from the night before had half vanished, covered by new flakes. I followed them anyway, just far enough to see where they stopped. Right at the edge of the tree line. It could have been anyone. A hiker. A neighbor. Even my imagination. But in my heart I knew better. I went back inside and locked the door. The key turned smoothly, perfectly. A sound I could get used to. That evening I built a fire early. The flames felt different now, not just warmth but warning. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window and watched the light flicker against the curtains. For the first time in a long while I felt something close to peace. Not the naive kind that believes the worst is over, but the kind that comes from knowing you've taken back control one lock at a time. Still, I couldn't shake the image of that fingerprint. It lingered in my mind like an unfinished sentence. Just before bed I took the cloth I'd used for dusting and wiped the glass clean. The mark disappeared but the feeling didn't. I left the curtains closed, the lights off, and stood there for a moment listening to the night breathe. Then I whispered to the empty room, "You can try the door all you want. It won't open anymore." The wind rattled the windows once as if in response. I smiled. When I finally went to bed, the new lock caught the moonlight, a small silver promise glinting in the dark. It wasn't just metal. It was memory sealed shut. And though I didn't know it yet, that night, the night the locks changed, wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything that would follow. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the floor, catching the faint gleam of the new key on my table. For the first time in months, I woke without that heavy feeling in my chest, the one that made me check the windows twice before bed. I brewed my coffee, opened the curtains, and told myself that maybe, finally, the house was mine again. For 2 weeks it was. The snow began to melt, the air grew softer, and I almost believed the worst was behind me. Then one afternoon while I was folding laundry, there was a knock at the door. Sharp, deliberate, familiar. I froze, holding one of my flannel shirts mid-fold. 3 knocks. Then silence. My first thought wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. Only 2 people ever knocked like that, the mailman and my sister. And it was Sunday. I set the shirt down, wiped my hands on a towel and walked to the door. Through the small glass pane I saw her, standing there in a heavy coat, cheeks pink from the cold, clutching something that looked like a casserole dish. Her face carried the same smile she always wore when she needed to get away with something. I didn't open the door right away. I just looked at her through the glass. The pause was long enough for her smile to falter. Finally I turned the lock, the new one, and opened it halfway. "Didn't expect visitors," I said. "I was driving by," she replied, as if mountain roads just happened to lead her here by accident. "Thought I'd stop in. I made lasagna." Her voice was too light, too rehearsed. I stepped aside and let her in, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to know why she was here. She walked in slowly, her eyes scanning the room. People think they can hide their intentions, but eyes always betray them. She looked at the walls first, then the new locks, then at the chair. "My chair. It looks different," she said softly. "You've changed things." "I like it that way," I answered. She set the dish on the counter, brushing imaginary crumbs off her coat. "I wanted to talk," she said. "You've been distant." I laughed, not cruelly, just tired. "You noticed." She sighed. "I know we've had our differences, but it's silly, isn't it? We're sisters." That word, sisters, had stopped sounding warm a long time ago. It had become something people used like a tea, expecting it to unlock forgiveness. I motioned toward the table. "You might as well sit. I don't suppose you drove all this way for small talk." She sat, careful to look calm, but her fingers betrayed her, tapping lightly against the table one after another. "I think we both said things we didn't mean," she started. "You mean you said things," I corrected. "And did things. I just noticed." She looked away, jaw tightening. "You always make things sound worse than they are." "No," I said quietly. "You just make them sound better than they were." Her eyes flicked toward the window, the same one that had once held that strange fingerprint. I watched her watching it, and something in my stomach tightened. "Did you come by last week?" I asked suddenly. Her head snapped toward me. "What?" "Last week," I repeated. "You didn't stop by?" "No," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Why would I?" I held her gaze for a long moment. Then I smiled faintly. "No reason." She looked down, pretending to adjust her sleeve. "You've always been paranoid," she muttered. "And you've always been careless," I said. "We balance each other out." I poured us both tea. She took hers with too much sugar as always. I drank mine plain, watching her over the rim of my cup. "I miss when things were simple," she said finally. When we could visit without all this tension. They were never simple, I replied. You just liked it better when you got your way. That one landed. She looked wounded for a moment, then smiled again, softer now, trying a different tactic. You've been alone too long up here, she said. It's made you bitter. I shook my head. It's made me clear. Silence followed. The clock ticked loudly in the corner. Somewhere outside, snow dripped from the eaves, a slow, steady rhythm. She reached for her cup, her hand brushing against the table where the new key lay. She noticed it, I could tell by the slight twitch of her fingers, but she didn't touch it. Not yet. Do you ever think about Mom? She asked suddenly. About how sad she'd be if she saw us like this? Mom hated conflict, I said. Which is probably why you got away with so much. Her mouth tightened. You're rewriting history. No, I said calmly. I'm just finally reading it out loud. She stayed longer than I expected. 2 hours, maybe 3. The conversation wandered through familiar territory, half-truths, small apologies, unspoken resentments. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted toward the locked study door. I noticed every glance. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated near the coat rack. You should visit sometime, she said. The kids miss you. I raised an eyebrow. Do they even remember who I am? She gave a small, brittle laugh. Of course they do. We stood in the doorway. The light outside had dimmed, the world fading into that pale blue before sunset. She adjusted her scarf, glanced once more toward the study, then looked back at me. You know, she said softly, I really didn't mean to hurt you. I know, I said. You never do. That's what makes it so easy for you. She didn't answer. Just nodded, slowly, as if accepting something she didn't quite understand. I watched her walk down the steps, her boots leaving perfect prints in the snow. She looked smaller somehow, swallowed by the cold. When her car disappeared beyond the trees, I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. Inside, the air still held her scent, that faint floral perfume she always overused. I opened a window to let it out. That's when I noticed something. On the counter where the casserole dish had sat, there was a thin smear, not food, not dust. Something oily like residue from a hand. I wiped it with a cloth and felt a strange unease settle in my chest. It was such a small thing, but small things had become her signature. I threw the dish away. Didn't even wash it. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the sound of her voice, the forced calm in it. I replayed every glance, every movement. She'd looked at the study door 5 times. The key twice. And she'd lingered by the window on her way out. I went to check. The window latch was still locked. But near the bottom corner of the frame, faint against the frost, was another smudge, small, crescent-shaped like the press of a fingertip. My stomach twisted. I wiped it clean, closed the curtains and locked the study door again, turning the key until it clicked twice. Then I took that same key and placed it under my pillow. Lying there, I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to maintain peace. The polite smiles, the forgiveness handed out like spare change. Every woman I know has a story like that. We call it keeping the family together, but really it's keeping yourself from falling apart. Around midnight, I heard something faint outside, a soft sound almost like a car door closing far away. I sat up, heart pounding. The wind had died and the silence made every sound clearer. I waited. Nothing. Then, after what felt like forever, a single knock echoed through the house. Not loud, almost gentle. I stood, moving quietly to the hallway. Another knock, softer this time. Who is it? I called. No answer. The air felt thick, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. I glanced toward the study door, closed, locked, safe. I stepped closer to the front door and peered through the peephole. Nothing but snow. So I waited. Sometimes silence is the loudest response there is. After a minute, I locked the deadbolt again, backed away and whispered, "Not tonight." The knocking didn't come again. In the morning, I found footprints on the porch, faint but fresh. Smaller than the ones I'd seen before. I stood there, the cold biting through my robe, and looked toward the tree line. The forest stood still, quiet, indifferent. I went inside, poured myself coffee and stared at the steam curling above the mug. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the knocking hadn't been random. She'd been here before and she'd come again, but next time she wouldn't just be knocking. I glanced at the study door. The key still sat under my pillow upstairs, safe. For now. But I also knew something had changed in her, something deeper than guilt. That visit hadn't been about reconciliation. It had been reconnaissance. He was looking for something. And soon I'd find out what. But I knew something had shifted. That visit hadn't been about reconciliation. It had been reconnaissance. He was looking for something. That thought followed me all night. Every creak of wood, every rustle outside felt deliberate. By dawn I still hadn't slept. I sat by the window as light crept over the snow, soft and deceptive, as if nothing in the world could go wrong beneath that calm. When I finally rose, I made myself a cup of coffee and went to the study. The lock turned smoothly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old paper and cedar. Everything looked untouched. Yet I could feel her in here, her curiosity, her entitlement, like a ghost lingering just beyond sight. On the desk lay my father's old ledger, the one she'd always been curious about. He'd used it to record property details, bills, every repair on this cabin since the day he built it. She'd once asked me where it was, joking that old paperwork might be worth something. I'd brushed it off then, but now I understood. She wasn't just nostalgic. She was calculating. The ledger was more than memory, it was proof. Proof the cabin, the land, everything was mine alone. No shared inheritance. No loopholes. She'd known that once. Maybe she'd forgotten. Maybe she wanted to forget. I flipped through the pages, tracing the handwriting I knew by heart. My father's notes, my own additions after his passing. The last page, mine, was marked with the deed transfer. Her name appeared nowhere. And there in the margin I noticed it. A small smudge, the faint print of someone's thumb. Not mine. I closed the book slowly, my pulse steady but heavy. She had opened this. He had looked. I locked the study again, pocketed the key and decided I wouldn't call her. Not yet. Let her think she still had the upper hand. For the next 2 days the air thickened with a quiet expectancy. The phone didn't ring. No texts. But silence from her never meant absence. It meant strategy. On the third evening a car engine echoed up the hill. Headlights flashed across the front window, cutting through the dusk. I didn't move at first. Just listened to the sound of tires grinding over gravel, then stopping. Another knock. Not tentative this time. Firm. Familiar. I opened the door before she could knock again. Back so soon? I asked. She stood there without her usual smile. No makeup. No casserole. Just her. We need to talk, she said. About what? About the house. So that was it. I stepped aside. Then come in. She hesitated, just a flicker of uncertainty, then crossed the threshold. I don't want to fight, she said softly. I just want what's fair. You already have that, I replied. Your home. Your family. Your life. Her jaw tightened. You know that's not what I mean. I said nothing. She walked past me into the living room, stopping near the fireplace. Her gaze landed inevitably on the chair. That same old chair. You still sit there? She asked. Every day, I said. I guess some things never change. No, I said, some things finally do. She turned to face me, arms crossed. You think I don't know what's in that study? Dad promised us both. Dad promised me, I interrupted. Because I was the one who stayed. The one who kept this place running when you left. Her voice rose. You always make me the villain. If you stopped playing the part, maybe I wouldn't have to. We stared at each other across the flickering light of the fire. Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet, relentless. She took a step closer. You changed the locks, she said. Yes. You didn't trust me. I still don't. Something broke in her face then. Not tears, not shame, just raw frustration. You've turned this into a war, she said. Over a house. It's not a house, I said. It's what's left of me. The room went silent except for the crackle of burning wood. Then she laughed, a small bitter sound. You always did like your drama. I let her words hang in the air. Then quietly, you broke into my home. Her eyes flicked up. What are you talking about? The window. The fingerprints. The ledger. Her expression froze. Just for a moment. Enough. I nodded slowly. So you did come back. She didn't deny it. Instead she looked away. I just wanted to see it, she whispered. To see what was mine. It's not yours. I helped build this life too, she snapped. You think you're the only one who sacrificed? You got the house, the peace, the inheritance. I got nothing. I took a deep breath, steady and low. You got freedom. You just never learned what to do with it. Her hands clenched into fists. You think you're better than me? No, I said. Just quieter. She moved toward the study door. You locked it, didn't you? Yes. She grabbed the handle. Open it. I don't owe you that. She turned sharply. Then I'll find another way. There was the real her. The mask slipping, the entitlement unmasked. I'd seen it all my life in smaller ways. In borrowed dresses never returned, in lies told with sweet tones, in guilt wrapped as love. But seeing it now in full light, I felt nothing but clarity. You should leave, I said. Not until I see the papers, she hissed. If you've forged something. I laughed. Forged? I kept what you discarded. Her face went red. You don't deserve it. And you don't decide that anymore. She reached for the door again. I stepped between her and it. The fire cast long shadows across the walls, stretching both of us tall and thin, like reflections of two women who'd stopped being sisters years ago. For a moment neither of us moved. Then I took the key from my pocket and held it out. You want to see? Go ahead. She hesitated. Really? Really? Her fingers trembled slightly as she took it. She unlocked the door and pushed it open. The study looked just as before. Neat, quiet, ordinary. She scanned the shelves, the desk, the ledger still sitting in the center. She reached for it, but I spoke first. You should be careful what you touch. She froze. What's that supposed to mean? I stepped closer. It means everything in here belongs to me now, and I keep proof of who enters. Cameras. Records. The lawyer in town knows. Her hand hovered over the ledger, uncertain now. You're bluffing, she said. Try me. She withdrew her hand. The silence between us stretched, taut as wire. Then she whispered, You've changed. I had to, I said. You forced me to. Her voice broke. I didn't mean. Yes, I said softly. You did. She stared at me, tears starting to form, then turned and walked out. At the doorway she stopped. You'll regret this, she said. I already did, I replied. That's why I'm done. I followed her to the porch. She pulled her coat tight, fumbling with her keys. The wind had picked up, snow swirling through the air. I hope you find peace, I said quietly. She didn't look back. You'll be alone, she muttered. I already am, I said. And it's better than being with people who think they own me. Her car started, headlights cutting through the snow. I stood there until they disappeared down the road, until the sound faded completely. Inside, the cabin felt warmer. Lighter. I closed the study door and locked it one last time. The ledger stayed where it belonged. The key, though, I didn't put back under my pillow. I dropped it into the fire. The metal hissed, then softened, glowing orange before vanishing into ash. That was the real ending. Not a fight, not forgiveness, just release. I poured myself tea, sat in the chair by the window and listened. No wind. No knocks. Just silence. Peace doesn't roar. It settles. It stays. I looked at the empty chair across from me, the one she'd once sat in like she owned it, and smiled. Some victories aren't loud. They don't demand witnesses. They're quiet, final, private. Outside, the snow began again, falling soft and sure. The world, it seemed, had finally caught up to my calm. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered to no one, You weren't using it. And this time it felt like the truth. Revenge didn't roar. It whispered through every breath of peace I finally allowed myself to keep. If this story hit a nerve, you're not alone. Subscribe for more powerful revenge stories, where silence, strength, and emotion say everything words can't.